moment here, and I'll share my screen. Now, Catherine, do you need to allow me to do that? Or Carolyn, rather?
You should be able to share. Anyone who joins the meeting has privileges of sharing.
Because that's usually just at the top, isn't it?
Yes, if you go to the top and there's a tab that says share, and then you would go to share content.
Okay.
Just while Jim's bringing that all up, what we're going to be talking about is the announcement that happened the day after our last county council meeting. It would have been easier to talk about the budget if we knew we were getting more money totally, but we'll work it into the next report, and everything will be explained properly to all of county council.
Now, are you all seeing a page that says Terrace project summary?
No.
Okay.
Not yet. We got Elgin County Finances starting to share content, so it's probably just a delay in the sky. So if you're patient for 30 seconds or so, or 2 minutes, wherever we may be, it looks like it's trying to work. Just so you know, it's switched over here to viewing Elgin County Finance, but we just have a blank screen at the moment. So it's obviously still trying to upload or download or something.
Okay. Or I just haven't done it properly. Let me just retry that. Did it work?
There we go.
Got it.
Oh.
Yeah, it's there now. Thank you.
So if you will remember back, and I'm sorry, I got the wrong date on there. That was January of 2019. The project was approved at 28.3 million. Then later in the year, on June 25th, we added another 4.2 million to the project. That was twofold. It was recognizing there was price escalation going on and putting in provisions for price escalation, as well as because the design had evolved from the initial concept and 2,800 feet were added. So in total, we added 4.2 million. That takes us to a total project of just under $32.6 million and gives us about 850 square feet per bed in terms of space. What we talked about at the last steering meeting and the last council meeting were two items that were going to add cost that seemed to be well received. And the two items are the oxygen rooms and staff locker rooms. I would add $110,000, as well as the fact that if we're going to be starting while COVID is still in place, and we've rearranged the construction schedule to allow for that, but there would have to be some extra construction cleaning to allow it to progress, we would be adding up to $225,000 of extra cost. The next item we didn't speak about at the last meeting. It's a new item and it's further down in the agenda. So we'll talk about that later. It's the nurse call system in the existing building. That's a number of years old, and engineering is suggesting that it would make sense to upgrade that at the time that we're putting in the nurse call into the addition. It's just a placeholder right now of approximately $100,000, and we'll have to confirm that once David gets the all the information on the current nurse call system in the core of the building.
Just want to interrupt before you go any further on that. Do we not have to put in the $10,000 for the lockers here too?
That's included in the 110.
Okay, all right.
So it's 100,000 oxygen, 10,000 lockers.
Okay,
I've showed it as one line item here.
Okay, that takes care of that. Thank you.
So that would bring the project up to $33 million. The bottom half of the page shows what the ministry has funded. And it's broken into two areas. One is lump sum and the other is per diem. Up until now, all the ministry has provided in the lump sum was a design funding of $250,000. However, with this new funding, they're talking about providing some lump sum funding for construction. There will be a cap, so they'll give you 10% of construction costs up to that capped amount. And we've been told that the cap would be about $20,000 per bed. That would then provide us with $2 million of grant that we would get up front towards the construction costs. On the per diem, you get paid so many dollars per bed per day, and that extends for 25 years. The base funding was $1,665, which would provide us just over $600,000 a year. That would effectively translate into funding $11.7 million of this project. Last June, they provided an extra $1.38, which would then provide an incremental $1 million effectively of capital funding. It looks like they're going to be providing us somewhere around $3 with this new funding formula that they're going to announce. And that could vary up or down by about 50 cents. We don't know the exact number yet, but that's somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 million that would provide us in funding. And lastly, there's an incremental per diem based on the size. We're considered a mid-sized home, which would give us another 75 cents or another $500,000. So in total, the province would be contributing about $17.6 million towards the $33 million project, which would mean that the ratepayers of Elgin would be funding $15.4 million. So now, Bob, do you want to pause and ask any questions at this point, or did you want to save everything to the very end?
Yeah, just a couple things. I'd like you to provide this to all the committee members after we're done this meeting. And
Yes,
can
will
we
do.
put in a comparison line that shows where we were at the last county council meeting and where we are now to show how much of a difference it's making?
Sure.
Do any of the county council members have any questions, or are you willing to wait till we go through the whole presentation and then we'll have our discussion about what to put in and what to take out? You will note that we have not included the dining room at this stage.
I'm prepared to wait till the end, Bob, because it'd be nice to have this whole package presented to us.
And in answer to your question about the comparison, so what we're looking at is the incremental $2 million in lump sum funding and the extra $3, which is again approximately $2 million of added funding. So the new funding announcement is somewhere in the $4 million range of incremental funding that the province will be providing. And yes, I'll add that as a line item on this chart before we send it to council, and I'll send it all to you in advance of that.
Okay, thank you. And Tom and Mary, you're both okay to go through the whole agenda and then we'll have our discussion?
Yep.
Then next, I think what would make the most sense is to get into the questions on the dining, and with that, Victoria and Michelle can take you through the drawings to show you what the current dining room looks like, and if we expand the size of the building, what it would look like then with the expanded building. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then pass it over to Victoria to share some drawings.
Okay, can you see the floor plan now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Michelle, you want me to start with the drawings and then you'll comment?
That works. Thanks.
Okay. So this is the first floor plan as was originally designed. So I'll zoom in a little bit just so you can see. Each RHA has this dining area which seats 25 residents but does not allow for 6-foot physical separation between residents. And I can show you that in 3D just so you get an idea of how much space there is between residents and how much space there is to move around. And so this would be the situation if there's no pandemic and there's no requirements for physical distancing. And then here we have the same floor plan, but in this situation, we've distributed residents between the dining room, activity room, and lounge in each RHA so that it's possible to provide the 6-foot separation between residents. So you can see there's 14 residents in the dining room, 4 in the activity room, and 7 in the lounge. So there's 6 feet between residents, but it's decentralized dining, which I can also show in 3D. So you can see there's much more space in between, but the rooms are spread out throughout the RHA. So that's the first design. And then here we have the redesigned building, which essentially relocates 2 private bedrooms from this location across from the dining room. The bedrooms are replaced in the addition, and then that provides an additional, just remind myself how many square feet.
About 2,100.
So 576 square feet of dining area per RHA. Yeah, and then you can see the 6-foot separation is possible with all residents seated in one location. And here's that shown in 3D for just to help you visualize.
Thanks. Victoria, could you go back to drawings 1 and 2, please?
Yes, yeah, just let me know when you want me to switch.
Well, actually, if you stay on the drawing 2, actually.
Okay.
So this has the 25 residents all in, this is our current design. So all 25 residents are there. You'll notice that the entrance to the dining room is very open. And the purpose, we had a lot of discussion when we were looking at the design for Terrace Lodge redevelopment. We started with a much larger dining room and we kept getting smaller and smaller based on other priority items that we felt were important. And we knew the limitations with going to this size. It does meet the standard, which is why we had a lot of conversation. Well, how can we make it more accessible? So we removed all of the walls there. Sometimes the dining room will just have 1 or 2 areas to exit, but this makes it fairly open. And one of the reasons we did that is because we have so many large chairs with our residents at present. So if we had some large chairs, they could be the folks that are, the back of their chair could be facing out to the corridor to just free up more space in the interior of the dining room. So we really, when we were planning and doing the design back then, we certainly did not contemplate physical distancing requirements during the design stages. And so it really could not be accommodated with just using this one room, which is would be really important. So we'll move to drawings 3 and 4. actually. So as Victoria, go back to 3 for a second, if you wouldn't mind, Victoria. Especially in the north wing, the distance that staff would have to travel. So the dining room that hosts, I think it's 13 or 14, Victoria, you've got in there. All of those
14.
14. So all of those residents are two to a table, and they also have plexiglass in the center of the table because the tables aren't 6 feet themselves wide. So it's plexiglass between each of those residents sitting at those tables. And then in the activity room on the left of that drawing, that's where 4 more residents sitting at the tables. And you can look at the travel distance. So the dietary staff and the nursing staff needing to travel to the lounge where there's 4 residents, or 7 or 8 you've got down there. So again, all of those residents have plexiglass at the tables. So that allows for the physical distancing within the current design. It certainly does do that with 2 residents per table. Some of the drawbacks with that piece is what I've mentioned is the travel distance, but also be quite disruptive and confusing for residents who would be temporarily reassigned dining locations during the times where the physical distancing would be required or mandated. It does put us not so much on the south side because they're a little closer if you look at the bottom half of that diagram, but on the north side in particular, it's become very challenging to monitor and supervise. So resident safety could be a bit of an issue if we were unable to replace a sick call. And certainly it's a change of staff routines and practices. So it would be a period of adjustment, not to say it's not achievable, but it would be a period of adjustment. And also the lounge and the activity space would, ideally you'd want to leave those tables up rather than setting them up and taking them down 3 times a day for each of the meals. So there's some limitations there with the residents having those 2 areas for programming or visiting. Certainly they could still go in and use it for program or visiting, but it's extra cleaning of those tables and those areas whenever they are used. So then the operational costs, which we'll get into further, but what we've calculated, trying to look at what would be the least amount of staffing that we would need to utilize. Certainly with 3 PSWs and 1 registered staff who's doing her medication pass, she can help at the end of the meal. PSWs in that dining room of 14, and you're going to need another person in the dining room of 1 and 1 to 2 people in the dining room of 7 to 8 residents in that lounge area. So that's above our current staffing needs at present. If there was a true pandemic, we know from this experience that we've had the fortunate experience of having our redeployed staff coming and helping us at the homes, but we're certainly feeling as they're returning to their workplaces, we know we're going to have to bring more PSW or other staff in to support those that are leaving us. So there's going to be some additional costs that we're looking at right now as well. So those are really, it's a quality of life issue with the loss of those 2 areas and spreading people out. It could be looking at that piece as well. If we move on to drawings 5 and 6. So those 2 dining rooms are directly across from each other. We've had a lot of discussions on our end about would we need additional staff? The answer was quite confidently spoken that we would not need additional staff because we could monitor between those 2 dining rooms with the 1 registered staff and the 3 PSW staff. And so there's a lot of opportunities. It certainly would meet the physical distancing requirements, no doubt about that. We would still have to have the plexiglass on each of those tables where there's 2 residents sitting when physical distancing is required. Tom, you asked a great question at County Council, caught me a little bit off guard, or somebody did, about what would we use that room for if we didn't require physical distancing. We would leave it as a dining room. And really, when you look at this diagram, and we can pop back to this diagram 2 in a minute, but when you compare this one to diagram 2, you can clearly see that it's very easy. If I'm sitting over by the window and I'm a late arrival coming, I don't have to move to we're quite often moving 2 to 4 wheelchairs with residents away from their table in order to get somebody who's arriving late to the table or has an urgent washroom need and needs to leave the table. We would not have to disrupt individuals at that table. So there's the seating is certainly more comfortably seating, a noise attenuation. So when you have a large dining room, the volume of noise is certainly louder than that when we were able to move residents to different. We also have more options for residents with challenging behaviors. We have the great pleasure of experiencing a 30-bed RHA at Elgin Manor, where they have in their secure unit 2 15-resident dining rooms, and that is quite efficient and effective at managing challenging behaviors. We can move residents between those 2 dining rooms. It's quite successful, and the dietary staff, there is 1 person that manages serving both of those dining rooms, and they're even further apart than they are in this particular situation, and the staff manage as well. So additional staff to navigate around tables, not only for residents, but staff to sit and feed as well. So providing that mealtime assistance. Additional space for families and visitors to assist with meals, and the overall ambience of the dining room, such as more like a restaurant setting. And we could even have those tables more randomly placed if we weren't needing that 6 feet in times of pandemic or outbreak. So it provides additional room when we're not having meals, where this second area could be utilized for some more programming opportunities for residents. So no operational costs are anticipated with the expanded dining room, but certainly having the capital costs of $750,000 by having the second dining area in each of the RHAs. Again, just kind of taking you back to our pre-pandemic planning and where we did settle on, if you want to go back to slide 1 or 2, Victoria, or drawing 1 or 2, we did settle with that by opening this area, but there was no physical distancing requirements. And some of the conversations that we're having on our end this is best practice, and it's probably going to be the approach moving forward for infection prevention and control of outbreaks, anything that's respiratory or airborne moving forward. There's no guarantee that that's going to be the requirement, but certainly we've learned a lot from the physical distancing that we've been doing. One of the drawbacks that we have had in our homes through pandemic, we've been so fortunate with the redeployed staff, but there was literally the only programming that was going on from March when it started until July was virtual visits. The staff recreation department was really assisting with mealtime assistance and managing all of those virtual appointments and visits to keep the family contacted. So to have the ability to do a little bit more with that would be greatly appreciated. Gail, is there anything from your perspective through all of our discussions that you'd like to jump in and add?
I think the only thing you might want to explain is the number of residents that, like why you need supervision simultaneously in the 3 dining rooms if you have to, physical distance in the original plan. I guess I could speak to that if you want, Michelle. We looked just at the current statistics, and right now, of the 100 residents living in the home, it's basically 25%, so 24 require total assistance at meals, which means they're basically require someone to feed them. 23 of them require queuing and some assistance. So that would be something like, okay, pick up your fork now, or you might cut their meat, or a lot of queuing is often saying, okay, you need to chew now, that sort of thing, just as people with dementia, that cognitive function declines, but you're still encouraging them to eat as much as they can. And then the other 50 require supervision. And in the act, it says that you have to have someone in every dining area at all times monitoring, just in case there's choking or anything like that. So just wanted to explain why you would need to bring extra staff to cover off the 3 dining rooms for 3 meals a day. So that's a bit of a challenge. And I think, Jim will speak a little bit more to the costing of that. I don't know, that'd be the only thing I would add, Michelle.
Yeah, so we had a lot of discussion around what's the lowest number of extra staffing support that we would be able to manage with, and the bare minimum is really looking at, for each resident home area, 9 hours of PSW to cover off the 3 meals, while still working within the current collective agreement. We do know that within at the last round of negotiations, we did agree to a letter of understanding within the collective agreement to have meetings to discuss opportunities for another classification. So we may be able to, within those same number of hours, maybe be able to introduce another classification, but we haven't entered into those conversations at this point. So it would be something that would have to be negotiated. So just wanted to share that piece. And maybe if council has any, or the steering committee has any questions before we move to the financials, or if you want to wait, that's fine too.
I prefer if you finish the presentation, then we can ask questions.
Okay, thank you. Turn it over to Jim then for some financials.
Okay.
Would you like the screen back, Jim?
Yes, please. So can everyone see the page that says Terrace Lodge Expanded Dining Analysis?
Yep, I'm good.
So with what was just presented with the drawings, effectively we're looking at 2 different options. One is the existing design, and the second is then an enlarged building to allow for expanded dining space. In every instance, we're able to provide social distancing during dining as required, if and when required. But in the one case, it's accomplished by spending money up front in capital investment to make a larger building. And in the other case, it's accomplished by having dining in remote areas, and that requires extra staffing, so it's an increase in operational cost. In order to give you a sense of sensitivity, this analysis is split up into 3 different scenarios. Each scenario is comparing the current design to the expanded dining space design. Under scenario 1, we are assuming that a COVID-like pandemic will happen every 30 years. In scenario 2, we're using more based on what we've seen historically. Although we've had other pandemics in the last 100 years, none of them have been significant like COVID. The last major significant pandemic was 1918. So scenario 2 is assuming that we have a major pandemic like that every 100 years. Scenario 3, recognizing that during council at the last meeting, one of the councillors was suggesting that social distancing has not been established as the definitive answer to ongoing, and which is true. It may become the standard, but right now that still is up in the air. And if it has not become the standard, then that's what scenario 3 is addressing. So in scenario 1, what we're saying is that every 30 years we would have a major pandemic that would take 2 years to recover from. So 2 years to where we would be in constant lockdown. And then in those other years, we would just have what we normally have, which is normal outbreaks. And as opposed to the past where normal outbreaks did not require social distancing, we're assuming that social distancing will be required during those outbreaks. So over the 30 years, on average, we would have 76 days a year of social distancing. Michelle took you through the staffing requirements if we use the current design, and we would need 36 extra PSW hours each day when we're social distancing at a cost of about $1,000 a day. So for those 76 extra days, that would cost us $86,000 of operational cost. That's not all pure extra cost, because if we go to a larger building, there are some costs to support a larger building. As an example, you'll have to have incremental utilities to heat and cool the larger space, as an example. So there is an offsetting $17,000 of cost to go to the operational wise to go to the larger building. The net savings of having the larger building is just under $70,000 under that scenario. And it comes at a cost upfront of $750,000 in capital investment. So that means it would take us 11 years to recover that investment. That's the payback period of making that investment in the larger building. Under scenario 2, which is based on having a major pandemic like COVID or like the 1918 Spanish flu once every 100 years. So rather than having on average 24 days of pandemic, this would only have 7 days on top of the normal outbreak days of 52. Again, assuming that with every outbreak, social distancing is required. So those 59 days per year on average of social distancing at $1,000 a day would cost $67,000. Deduct the $18,000 of operational increases for heating, etc., for the enlarged building. The net gain of having a larger building is reduced cost of $50,000, but again requiring a $750,000 capital investment up front. In this case, it would be 15 years in order to recover your money. In the last scenario, if social distancing does not become the norm moving forward, then there is no benefit financially to the larger building. As Michelle took you through, there's lots of qualitative benefits to the larger building, but from a financial perspective, there would not be any. And you would still have a larger building that you'd have to heat and clean. And so you would spend $750,000 to build the larger building, and it would cost you an extra $18,000 a year to heat and cool, etc., that building. So it would just be then pure incremental cost, but as Michelle says, delivering qualitative benefits by doing so. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Jim, this is pretty much all the data about why and financially what the impact is. Would it be wise, before we do the rest of the agenda, to try and have the council members make a decision on whether or not they want to put this recommendation before all of county council?
Certainly.
Okay, I can kind of kick that off, and then I really need the input of all the members of the committee that are going back to county council. As it stands, we're going to be recommending an extra $435,000 added to the budget. However, when you factor in the additional provincial funding that we got the day after last county council, we end up with a net 3.56 million, somewhere in that neighborhood, $3.5 million less coming out of the taxpayer of Dutton pockets direct. Now it's all one taxpayer, but the province is chipping in a considerable more amount. So it's a much easier sell when we go back to county council to sell that. I don't think that there's any problem selling those particular budget items, because I believe we already ran them past county council and they seem quite receptive. So we're really down to, do you want to add the 750? Looking at how much the paybacks are, when and if. And we always have to keep in the back of our mind that a lot of this is predicated on the fact that COVID-19 or something similar is going to happen again, where we have the social distancing as a requirement. So having done that, might as well just start with the warden first, get his feedback, and then we'll work to Mary and Tom.
Okay, thanks, Bob. I'd certainly be in favor of the offer in there anyway, and you want to update the call center for the nurses. Now's the time to do it. Whether you do it now or 2 years from now, it's going to be cheaper to do it now. As far as the extra room for the dining rooms, I'm confident there's going to be a vaccine in 2020, and I don't think we'll be facing this in 2021. To spend $750,000 on something that may or may not be used in the future, I have some doubts on spending that sort of money. We've been back to this would be the third time we've been back to council looking for extra funding, and so I think I can probably use the first three items I said. I think that would make sense. The last one with the $750,000 for the extra dining room, we can accommodate it at the present time by going to the activity room and still keeping social distancing. So I would not be in favor of number 4.
Mary, do you want to add some comments?
Yes, thanks, Bob. I agree with the warden about the first 3 items. I believe that those are things that we should be looking at. And so I definitely think that that should be taken back to county council for approval. But I have to say that I'm torn with the dining room addition. I know it's costly, but I also know that it's difficult to work in a dining room at any given time. So even though the pre-COVID layout, basically what we were wanting to do in the first place, yes, it will work. But until you've actually worked in that scenario, and I would challenge any one of you to go in there at any meal, I'm pretty sure you'd find it very difficult. I've done it, I've lived it, so I know what it's like. And when you have, as Michelle stated, you have people that may have to get out to go to the washroom, you have people choking, you have others that need assistance, you have to feed residents. It's a lot of work, and it's hard on the staff because, as I've said before, it's almost like a liability issue when the call bell's ringing and you've got people running all over the place and it's lunchtime or dinner time and you're trying to feed the residents and look after them, and you have to monitor all residents because the choking problem is very prevalent. And so I'm very torn on this. I think that county council should really look at this again. I'm not saying that we have to do it, but I think they should have a thorough discussion about it, Bob. That's my take on it.
Thanks, Mary. Tom? Tom, do you want to jump in? You may be muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. Put Jim on the spot. What's the county's total budget yearly? Roughly.
On the levy side, we spend or we collect about $36 million, and we spend about $60 million.
So this $750,000 is a lot of money to anyone. And I like to think I spend money at the county just like I would my own money. But, you know, when this project is done and we look back, we'll forget the cost if we're satisfied. I think that's why I put Michelle on the spot at the county council meeting, because they're the experts. They're there. I agree with they lived it. I don't think $750,000. We hope this building is going to be there for 30, 40, 50 years. Who knows? I think it's good money. I agree with Mary. I don't like spending money, but I think this might be wise money. That's my take.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Jim, I'm going to make a suggestion, and Warden agrees. This is how I'd like to go forward with the presentation to County Council. I'd like to go in as a committee, wholly endorsing the items that add up to the $435,000, all the things except the dining room expansion, and also report simultaneously the net impact on our local taxpayers of the increased funding from the province. Then I want to pull out the dining room again and allow Michelle and others to do a presentation, including you, like you have done to this committee. And let every member of county council share those same facts and let them as a county council, because it affects their budget eventually, tell us yes or no. Without this committee fully endorsing or saying we don't want to do it. Because right now, basically, we've got 4 people on the committee, and if we had a vote right now, we'd have a tie vote with the warden and I saying, no, we got to take it out, and Tom and Mary saying, yes, we should leave it in. So I think it's prudent that we go back to all of county council with the facts and let them make that decision. Mr. Warden, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm full in favor of that, Bob. I do have a question for Jim on this extra funding that was announced in July for long-term care. Is there conditions on that funding? I know the Premier was demanding that all long-term care home have air conditioning, which we have, but is there other conditions on that?
I mean, there's the conditions as they are in the design standard, but they are not changing the design standard. And we already met the design standard, so there are no issues there.
Okay, okay.
Okay, just before we move off this, and I just want to make sure that Tom and Mary agree with that approach, and then we can leave it in Jim's hands to work with Michelle and put together a presentation at the next county council. You guys both okay with that?
Yes, I am.
I am. Can we, in that report back to county council, can we have a staff recommendation? Because I value that, because they're the experts. I can have an opinion, and I'm looking at these figures and doing my best to, but staff are the experts, and I wonder if we could have their recommendation. Doesn't mean we're going to take it, but to me, that throws some weight.
And that would be a joint representation from Jim and Michelle, I would think. One who looks after the pocketbooks all the time, and Michelle who runs the place. Michelle and Jim, are you able to work on that together?
Yeah, we might have a tie vote on that one too, but
Yeah, as you said, there's going to be conflicting views, and I mean, Michelle will speak from the perspective of the homes. I would present it from the overall county, and every investment we make ultimately crowds out investment in other areas that need it, and that's where I would highlight that it needs to be considered the amount of investment and is it all, how much do you want to direct towards the homes versus other needy service areas as well.
Does that satisfy you, Tom?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll toss things back to Jim and let him finish the agenda.
Now, David, do you want to continue on with any other agenda items that we want to go to in more detail from the design standpoint and timing?
There was an agenda put forward. And are there any additions, deletions from the draft agenda that was circulated?
No, not for me.
Now, so I can quickly run through the agenda then. The June 23rd steering committee meeting minutes, I have not seen those. I was expecting that county staff, like the previous meetings, have prepared them. So that's something that in the absence of them would need to be deferred to a subsequent meeting.
We'll do that.
Okay. Moving on to item 2.1, schedule. At this point, we're anticipating proceeding with the design of the 4 items that were identified in the $435,000 amount if the steering committee deems that appropriate. Alternatively, the consultants would wait for any redesign to proceed until the August 11th council meeting. the question is, should the specifically nurse call upgrade in the existing portions of the building that aren't being renovated, should that proceed at this time, I guess, is the fundamental question.
Okay, it's Bob, it won't make any real difference if we wait till August the 11th and get formal approval of county council, will it? We're talking a couple weeks.
Yeah, the reality is between now and then is the delay to the start of construction, and that's not that long.
I personally would prefer, because as we're finding out, there are difference of opinions on a few things here, so I would prefer that we win with our recommendations and let county council make the decision that it's cast in stone and we can move on from there. That okay with the warden?
Yeah, because we're less than 2 weeks away.
Understood. The 2.2 project schedule, the previous project schedule update was included with the circulation for this meeting. That will be delayed by another month and a half relative to the June 16th update, given the time between June 16th and the August 11 council meeting. So just to give you a sense that what was a November construction start anticipated will now be realistically sometime in the early in the year 2021. So that covers off 2.3. We typically wouldn't see construction starting over the Christmas break for any number of reasons. One being that if there isn't outbreak, that there are that many events at a home that it doesn't make sense to start construction before then. Are there any questions on schedule before I move to item 3?
I think in real life, we're probably looking at the very early spring, March, somewhere around that time frame. It's probably a better time to start construction in any event because of our cold winters.
Certainly that is a consideration. I would suggest that we defer to D. Grant, the construction manager, as to whether that makes sense to start in the what might be perceived as the dead of winter. There is one advantage here, given that there tends to be less rain in the winter than spring, and getting foundation excavated and footings poured before the rain of spring sometimes actually is a good strategy. But I don't disagree with you, Bob. I would suggest we simply take the advice of D. Grant, the construction manager.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I just wanted you aware that when we started this, we were obsessed with getting it built because it had dragged on for a long time. But now that the realities of the pandemic and everything else have set in, there's not that same sense of urgency. We'd rather let you as the professionals take the necessary steps and do it when it's most appropriate.
Okay.
Once again, it depends on the weather. I mean, last winter was very mild. If we have the same winter as we had last winter, construction never really stopped last winter, whereas some winter's been minus 30 for 30 or 40 days where you simply can't do anything. So the weather's going to be the boss.
Agreed. Item 3.1, we're expecting for by August 4th to have budget updates from D. Grant that corroborate or correct the estimates that MMMC has provided to Jim that he has included in this report. So we're not looking for a full update. We're just looking for an assessment of the specific items that are being proposed to be added to the design scope. And we would also just ask expectee grant to render an opinion of how the marketplace has shifted since they produced their last budget update, which actually goes back to January of 2020. Are there any questions on construction manager? Hearing none, we'll move to item 4.1. Jim, you asked this item B, and I'll let you speak to it.
Yeah, so 4.1 we've already discussed at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay. Nothing further to add?
No.
All right. Item 4.2 has been discussed from a budgetary standpoint. Are there questions that we might answer at this point? Otherwise, I don't think there's much more to discuss at this point.
No, this is probably a common sense approach and it'll probably save us money down the road.
Yeah, it's Bob, I just want to clarify when we're talking about doing that, we're talking about upgrading the entire facility, not just the new addition, right?
Correct.
And the only question we might get at county council is, why is that not an operational expense versus put it on this project? I prefer it on this project, but that's the only question I can think that you better have an answer for.
I mean, it would definitely be a capital expense regardless. It would just be a question of whether it's a capital expense down the road in a future year, or whether we do it at the time of the project, and in which case we still would need funding to add for doing it at this point in time.
I think the two compelling reasons at this point would be that we've recently learned from staff that the system is on its proverbial last legs, and then the logic is that there's far less impact if you do it with the renovation, the phased renovation of the existing core, rather than doing it after the fact 1 or 2 years down the road. So it simply mitigates the overall impact to operations and residents' daily life.
So David, is this the original system from 76 or 77 when it first started?
Cole would know better the answer to that question.
Well, can you repeat that question?
The question, Cole, the nurses' call system, is this the original system that was installed in 76 or 77 when the building was first put up, or has it been renovated?
It's not the original, but it is, from my records, over 20 years old.
Oh, okay, all right.
Like anything technological, that's its service life, so
Okay.
It's in need of replacement.
Okay, thanks, Cole.
Yep.
Item 4.3, dining room operational cost review, is what we discussed at the onset of the meeting. Moving to item 5.1 and 5.2, staff locker room. We didn't discuss much other than to say that the increased count takes advantage of existing space but replaces all the lockers so that we have the half-height lockers required for individual locker and no sharing, which addresses infection prevention and control considerations. And then, of course, the dining, item 5.2, dining capacity, was also well presented by Michelle at the onset of the program. Are there any questions about the architectural design before we head to mechanical?
No.
Moving to 6.1 and 6.2, just a quick explanation to make sure that everyone understands. The oxygen is creating dedicated oxygen storage rooms within the current design. So we're not expanding the building, but we're creating dedicated storage rooms. The storage is for oxygen tanks so that the 24 to 48 hours that it takes between the time when staff would call for oxygen concentrators until the third-party provider can deliver them to the home, those tanks are used for that 1 to 2 day period. And so we've provided for tanks for 25% of the residents in the home to have what we believe, based on staff input, is sufficient redundancy that that 1 to 2 day period can be bridged until oxygen concentrators are provided for residents who have respiratory infection. Are there questions on the oxygen storage strategy that's being proposed? In that case, I'll move to 6.2. The negative pressure in the bedrooms is one of the most cost-effective solutions that Smith and Anderson was able to come up with. It involves the addition of a switch, literally like a light switch, that staff would manually put a vertical fan coil in a given bedroom into what would be a negative pressure condition where it exhausts 500 CFM as opposed to its usual 150 CFM air exchange. It would be limited to 3 or so bedrooms in a given home area, but staff input thought that that would be sufficient to be able to create a pseudo negative pressure bedroom. It's not a hospital grade, but from everything we've heard about isolation of residents, we believe that that will be better than most homes will have incorporated in the new redesign, and that the design already has separate individual bedrooms for each resident. So you don't have any resident sharing a bedroom in a standard or basic bedroom. And that, combined with the ability to put any one bedroom into a negative pressure situation, should keep or isolate not only the resident, but any airborne viruses that are needing to stay within the bedroom. Are there any questions about the mechanical infection prevention and control measures that are being added to the design scope?
It's Bob. We've been telling everybody that this is revenue neutral. We can absorb it in our budget. Are we still comfortable with that, or we need some small amount, like an extra $5,000 or $10,000 in budget request to cover this off? I don't want to ever come back again to county council. Like to make the decision on the 11th and then just run with that.
I agree with your approach, Bob. It's prudent. August 4th, when we get the budget update from D Grant, would be the time that we would inform Jim whether there should be an adjustment to the $435,000 that the steering committee today is going forward as a recommendation to council.
Okay, best guess is, though, that we'll just be adding a modest amount, like 5 or 10 grand at the most.
At this point, there's nothing to suggest that the numbers aren't correct now, but it's good to have the construction manager render their opinion a week in advance of the council meeting.
Okay, Jim, if we add anything, make sure all the members of the committee are briefed before the county council meeting.
Yes, we'll do that.
Thank you.
And that covers the agenda items that were on the draft agenda.
Okay, I'll kind of jump in. I think that takes us through everything, doesn't it, Jim?
It does.
Okay, I'm going to suggest that we leave the next meeting at the call of the chair, because what happens at the 11th at county council will give clear marching orders to the working part of it, and they'll be able to run with it. And I don't think, and you can correct us if I'm wrong, I don't think there's any reason for the committee as a big group needs to get together till we get some firm dollars and some firm start dates and something that we should all be briefed on, that we might even have to do another press release or something just to bring the public up to speed. My next concern is once we get this finalized as far as the design and how much it's going to cost, of course, we have to be able to start giving things to our fundraising group in the Elmer area so that they've got something concrete to work with. Pretty hard for them to try and raise any funds right now when basically we don't have the answers to everything. So is it wise that we just have this postponed until call of the chair, and when we got something concrete to report to the committee, we'll do that. And we might even bring in Dominique at the next meeting.
I'm good with that.
Yep, that's fine.
You okay with
Sounds
that,
good.
Jim? Michelle? Okay, that sounds like what we'll do then, Jim, if you want to adjourn the meeting, or I'll adjourn the meeting.
Guess I'll leave that to you, Bob.
Okay, yeah, just like my wife always tells me. Then the truth comes out. Anyway, I thank you folks very much. If there's any change to what we're going to be presenting, we'll get back to you if we have to add a little bit of money for the negative rooms. If we don't, you won't hear from us till county council, and we'll be presenting everything except the expanded dining room, and that will be a presentation from staff with county council making the final call. Okay, thank you, folks.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.